There was a box of food in almost every ancient farming village that starving people were forbidden to open, not hidden from thieves, hidden from themselves. Inside it sat the one thing that could have ended their hunger that same night. That box held seed corn. Picture the farmer. His field should be shoulder high with green stalks by midsummer. Instead, drought or blight has left it stunted and pale. No harvest, no refrigerated trucks, no store down the road. Zero didn't mean an inconvenient year. It meant people were going to die. So what did they eat? Wild plants, bark, whatever they could hunt. But that's not the part of this story that should stop you. The part that should stop you is what they refuse to eat. In nearly every corn-dependent society, a portion of the harvest was set aside before anyone was fed. Before bread, before stew, before a single hungry child got a share. That portion was the seed corn, the kernels meant for next spring's planting. Here's the detail that turns this into something darker. During a famine, that box of seed corn often sat closer to the starving than any other food in the village, sometimes inside the same room, untouched. Why? Because the math of an ancient famine wasn't measured in one bad year. It was measured in what came after. Eat the seed corn, and hunger eases for a few days. But spring arrives with nothing to plant, no crop. The same catastrophic zero, except now it repeats, stacked on a village already weakened, already out of food, tools, and strength. Agricultural historians studying traditional farming societies call this the seed-eating spiral, one of the most common ways a single bad harvest turned into a famine lasting years. So the seed corn wasn't just seed. It was the only thing standing between surviving and not surviving at all, which meant it had to be guarded, not just stored. Communities chose their largest, healthiest ears months before any famine was possible, dried them carefully, kept them separate from everyday food, braided and hung inside homes, or sealed in lined underground pits. That separation mattered once real hunger set in, because the temptation wasn't hypothetical. It was sitting right there. Some communities wrapped the seed corn in taboo, even spiritual weight, because willpower alone doesn't always hold when people are weak and children are crying for food. A rule enforced only by common sense breaks. A rule that feels sacred has a better chance of surviving the worst night. Picture that farmer again, walking past the one container in his home that could end his hunger immediately, and leaving it exactly where it was, not because he wasn't starving, because he understood something that mattered more than tonight. But the story gets stranger still. Protecting seed corn wasn't only about willpower, it was strategy. Some communities split their reserves across more than one location, so a single fire, flood, or raid couldn't erase next year's planting in one disaster. Others deliberately saved more seed than needed, as a buffer. And in the most extreme famines, some made an almost unthinkable calculated trade, eating only a portion of the seed corn, gambling that a smaller planting next spring beat guaranteeing zero seed and zero hope. That single decision could define whether a village still existed 5 years later. This was never really a story about corn. It was about people who understood that survival sometimes meant refusing the very thing that could end their suffering that same night, because giving in only guaranteed a worse ending later. Corn wasn't just a crop to these communities. It was a promise to a future they weren't certain they'd live to see. And the truest proof of how seriously they took that promise wasn't in what they finally chose to eat when the harvest failed. It was in the box they chose not to open.